As we've already heard, Lilly's interest in astrology began during his time working for Gilbert Wright, whose first wife Marjorie had enjoyed visiting various healers and fortune tellers, such as the London physician and astrologer Simon Forman. Lilly reveals in his memoir that Forman had also made a protective magical talisman for his late wife Ellen's first husband, which he had discovered amongst her possessions after her death. Made of angel gold, an old coin of high gold content, it contained various protective inscriptions and sigils, including the tetragrammaton and the names of several angels. Lilly was intrigued. At that time, the use of magical talismans was not at all uncommon as a way to ward off illness, bad luck, or negative energy, much like people today might use crystals or wear a necklace with sacred inscriptions or holy symbols on it, such as the crucifix. This practice can be traced to the Picatrix, a Persian handbook on practical magic with links to far older works, including the Greek magical papyri, and in turn Babylonian astral magic, that had been reintroduced to Renaissance Europe after being translated from Arabic into Latin, and had become more widely accepted in Western esoteric circles, thanks to scholars like Marsilio Ficino, who popularized the notion of what he called natural magic. And indeed, one of the previous owners of Lilly's copy of the Picatrix, which is now in the British Library, is known to have been Simon Forman, the very same man who constructed Ellen's talisman. Lilly, in turn, would pass it on to his friend Elias Ashmole when he became interested in the subject, and Lilly grew tired of dabbling in what he termed the black arts. Lilly, for his part, went through a phase of experimenting with various esoteric practices and traditions, including the summoning of spirits using invocations, as well as talismanic magic, but would eventually settle on astrology as his main interest, once he had satisfied for himself the question of whether there was any verity in the art or not, and mastered it sufficiently to make sound prognostications of his own. He first began to take a serious interest in astrology in 1632, when he was introduced via a clergyman to John Evans, who was said to be an excellent wise man and studied in the black art. Evans, a Welshman by birth, had formerly been a clergyman in Staffordshire, but had been forced to flee to London when his occult activities attracted the attention of the church authorities. While Evans taught Lilly the rudiments of astrology, Lilly soon developed a low opinion of his tutor. Eventually, they parted company when Evans misrepresented the astrological facts to a client in order to please her. Thereafter, Lilly continued his studies on his own, building up a comprehensive library of classic texts. Having perfected the art through a mixture of self-study and practice, Lilly began to offer private consultations and teach astrology in 1634. At that time, he was also experimenting with various other forms of occultism. His autobiography contains many descriptions of talismanic magic, crystal gazing, the invocation of spirits, and other incredibilia during this period. However, perhaps because by then he had married his second wife, who he later described as being of the nature of Mars, or because of his busy consultation schedule, Lilly's health appeared to decline in around 1635. He wrote in his memoirs that around that time he became very much afflicted with the hypochondriack melancholy, growing lean and spare and every day worse. Suffering from what appears to be burnout, he decided to leave London and rented a house at Hersham near Esher in Surrey in May of 1636, where he lived quietly until his health had been restored. Some historians have hinted that this decline in Lilly's health may have had something to do with his magical studies, emphasizing that Lilly reported burning his magical textbooks not long after leaving London. However, depression among serious students was not an altogether unfamiliar phenomenon. Several centuries before, Marsilio Ficino had written about the effects of Saturn on scholars and intellectuals. Before the discovery of Uranus in 1781, Saturn was considered to be the planet situated furthest from the Earth, and therefore the most removed from everyday embodied life. As such, astrologers like Ficino believed that individuals with an excess of Saturn in their charts, or those who chose to lead a life of solitude and serious study, such as a monk, could lead to melancholy, a condition often associated with depression and a sense of isolation. Ficino himself had been born under Saturn's influence, and saw this planetary force as both a source of wisdom and a potential burden. In his personal correspondence, he would sometimes lament the fact that his ascendant was Saturn-ruled, and that Saturn was also rising at the time of his birth, something he saw as both a blessing and a curse. He believed that his own astrological makeup contributed to his introspective nature and scholarly pursuits, but that this heavy planet was also to blame for his melancholic temperament. In his work, 3 Books on Life, Ficino explored ways to counteract the negative effects of Saturn, recommending practices associated with the benefics, such as engaging with music, surrounding oneself with beauty, and even specific dietary choices to help offset the potential downsides of living predominantly under the influence of the greater malefic. He viewed melancholy as a double edged sword. While it could foster profound insight, it also carried the risk of emotional distress. This idea of scholars struggling with melancholy has persisted through the centuries, with many thinkers and artists identifying with Saturn or the melancholic temperament as both a source of creativity and wisdom and a challenge to overcome psychologically. Given Lilly's diligence, it is entirely possible that he had come across Ficino's work, and so for similar reasons had opted to make a personal change in a bid to counteract the negative effects of his natal Saturn in Scorpio. And certainly, if we look at his transits for that year, we see that he was experiencing several difficult transits involving Saturn, including a conjunction of Neptune on his natal Saturn in the eighth house, as well as transiting Saturn, which was making a conjunction to his natal moon in Capricorn, a debilitated position which can, under challenging circumstances, lead to feelings of pessimism and depression, or what Lilly would have called melancholy.